Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the most exhilarating podcast on the entire internet.
Yeah. I mean, you can't see it, but
Yeah, it's
they're
there.
all
We're
up.
not, we're not allowed to lie about these things, so you know it's true.
Yeah.
The Greg and Joe Turbo Show. I'm your host, Joe, joined as always by my co-host, Greg. Greg, how's it going? There he is, wearing a green hoodie. We were discussing earlier whether or not I'm going to superimpose funny things on that before we release this episode, so stay tuned to find out. Uh, we are super lucky to be joined again by our previous guest, who was, for whatever reason, agreed to come back. I thought we might have scared him off the first time, but apparently not yet. So Adam Biegeleisen, oh, so close.
Nailed
Biegeleisen.
it. Recovered.
At this point, it's
Good
a running
recovery.
gag. At this point, it's a gag. But hey, Adam, thanks for joining us again. How are you?
Yeah, no, doing well. Glad to be back and looking forward to continuing the chat.
Yeah, and again, I think I learned a lot from our first conversation. And I know, our first sort of deeper dive into the Apptio suite of products, and I thought you did a great job of providing an overview and kind of introducing what each of the platforms can do. Generally, of course, we can dive deeper, and that's kind of the point of today's episode, right? Is now that we've had that introduction, maybe we can dive deeper into specific aspects of the Apptio portfolio. And I think, it probably makes sense to start with the big one, right? Which would be ApptioOne.
The big one.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah.
I see what you did there. That was good.
But I guess maybe we can just start with sort of the most obvious question. Like, what is ApptioOne? What is this thing?
That's a good question, Joe.
Good question, right? I wrote that one down, actually. I have that one. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So what's ApptioOne? ApptioOne's really where Apptio started. What year is it now? 2024. So coming up on 20 years ago, a little less than 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. ApptioOne is kind of that original core TBM, or technology business management platform, that we set out to build when our CEO was looking for his next big thing. And a whole bunch of CIOs that he talked to and had gotten to know from his former lives told him that it was just really darn hard to manage the technology business. So everybody had their hands full enough kind of managing the complexity of the operations and all of the infrastructure and the people, but understanding, how to kind of wrap their arms around it from more of a business perspective, and how do the financials translate to all of this? What are my opportunities to do better? Where am I spending too much, too little? How do I better plan and forecast what I can expect my spend to really be in a rapidly, accelerating and evolving world of technology? And so we kind of built the company on top of this ApptioOne platform that we had established at the time, and it started as a core technology platform to overcome kind of the data challenges and technical inhibitors to getting answers to those kinds of business questions. And what it evolved to over the next several years was a set of applications on top of that platform that were purpose-built to help provide those management capabilities for various forms of stakeholders and roles, and to manage different parts of that business and financial management lifecycle, whether it be building and revising plans, whether it be understanding and providing genuine transparency into costs to deliver technology from a whole bunch of different perspectives on an ongoing basis, and to do all of this in an automated manner against a technical landscape of lots of potential data that was never really built or designed to play nicely together.
Who are these personas or stakeholders that ApptioOne typically caters to?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's anybody with a vested interest in technology spend. And so, from a traditional perspective, we talk a lot about IT in more recent years. We're talking about technology as kind of probably the more accurate word and meaningful word as we move over time, right? Because IT has really kind of taken over the business. Business today is technology. So anybody who has a stake in the technology spend has a place to get their questions answered in Apptio. So we have executives, technology executives, who really need to understand the big picture and have kind of that executive set of views that help them understand, hey, what am I spending? What am I getting for it? What are the units of value that actually matter, that I need to use to kind of run my own business and to be able to articulate what value I'm providing to my bosses. And then we also have a whole set of stakeholders and folks who are actually doing that work and need to understand their own pieces. So infrastructure folks need to understand how they're tracking against their budgets, and especially, to the extent that the kinds of capacity that they need to bring on an ongoing basis aren't necessarily what had originally been planned for, right? Priorities change, strategies change, execution changes. Now all of a sudden we have too much capacity, we have too little. How does that match against funds that we have and spend plans? So infrastructure has a whole play here. Application, portfolio, service, solution owners, right? The owners of the capabilities that technology is actually delivering, right? Whether they be IT technical services, whether they be customer-facing products. At the end of the day, the technology organization delivers capabilities, and owners of those capabilities and of the portfolio of capabilities need to understand how all of that cost translates to each of those things they deliver. And you can imagine that a complex technology deliverable with support requirements, ongoing development, underlying infrastructure resources, maybe space in a data center, or more commonly resources in the cloud. All of these make up parts of that picture and are very hard to kind of get a common understanding of without a purpose-built solution. So you also have, of course, your core finance users. So who's tracking, IT spend, technology spend at its core? It's the finance folks who are responsible for doing all that. And so we provide a whole bunch of automation that helps them and gives them views in those core financial sets of categories too. So really there are views for everyone, and it's kind of that platform capability underneath that's responsible for making sure that all of the relevant and useful data feeds in are coming in and are being run through our rules and modeling and allocation engine, so that all of those kind of ongoing incoming pieces of data are synced to provide all of these translations to all of these different users.
So what's the scope of ApptioOne? So you kind of mentioned, you said the cloud at some point. So obviously, in our last conversation, you introduced some of the other platforms in the portfolio, one of them being Cloudability. So is there, I guess, from an ApptioOne perspective, is ApptioOne also used to ingest that cloud spend as well, to kind of provide sort of a holistic look at cost, including things that aren't being hosted in the cloud, or how does that play out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, especially with the proliferation of cloud in recent years, and with the whole additional kind of solution component that we provide in Cloudability and the whole FinOps side of the house, it's easy to understand why it could, how the question could come up. Well, what about cloud? Where does cloud fit into ApptioOne? Is that a thing, or is that separate? At the end of the day, Cloudability and FinOps, there's a whole bunch of specific capabilities purpose-built for the cloud that we provide in that platform, and I think we're going to be talking about that in potentially a future session here.
Sure.
If I'm welcome back.
If you'll come back, I mean, I'm telling you.
But if you think about it, right, the ApptioOne side of the house, built around this idea of technology business management, or from a more traditional sense, IT financial management, right? That's another common acronym that's similar, not necessarily exactly the same, but similar, kind of a subset of TBM potentially. The whole idea here is that this is supposed to span the entire landscape, and cloud's part of that landscape. So there's a lot of depth, and there's a lot of kind of cloud-specific capability and opportunity that Cloudability and FinOps surfaces and deals with. But even on the TBM side, even in that broader picture side, cloud is a key and growing part of that. So cloud feeds into TBM alongside all of that other stuff that is happening outside of the cloud.
So would it be safe to say then, like, the hybrid approach is a common approach and a smart one, right? Having some things hosted in the cloud, having some things hosted, in your private data center. So is it common or I guess at least not uncommon for customers to own both platforms then? I mean, you would have ApptioOne and you would also have cloudability because like you said, for the cloud in particular, there are certain things you want to be as sort of deep as possible, and that's really where cloudability can kind of come in. But you'd have both, and you'd kind of have the full protection, if you will.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And you can start on either side, so you don't need either solution to support the other solution. And so you can start kind of with the right solution component, right? Cloudability or ApptioOne based on who you, Mr. or Mrs. prospective customer are, who you are and what your challenges are, right? So whatever your challenges are in this range of managing the business side of and the financials of my environment, whether I'm focused specifically on cloud and those nuances, or whether I need a broader picture and I need to support other broader types of financial or business management related needs, we look to align the right solution to what we're hearing from you and how we can help. So we start in either place, and then obviously success breeds success, and getting a positive start either on the cloud side or on the TBM side often gives us the opportunity to continue to kind of tell the story and identify other ways that the rest of the solution stack can add additional value.
That's nice. I mean, that certainly helps from a sales position, right? When the first one works, it always makes the second one look much better as well,
It
Opens
does.
that door for you.
It does. I'll tell you though, as long as we're talking about the sales perspective, it can be a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because what it can be, what can be trickier is when you're new to all of this. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of there's kind of a lot of subdomains within this TBM, ITFM, FinOps, et cetera spaces, and then you throw in enterprise agile management and planning on top of it, and it's potentially a lot of subdomain content. So the benefit, the nice thing about the solution is you can start where it makes sense. But from a selling perspective, especially to folks who are new to all of this, it can be a little tricky up front to figure out what the right questions are to ask in order to figure out, to start directing that potential sales cycle, right? So definitely a place to lean on folks like myself and my colleagues over at Apptio and the sales reps that we work with in order to, kind of wrap your arms around how to start to filter this stuff down so that we can all be targeting the right solution for the right folks at the right time for the right reason.
Is that in part due to, because I know, like, from a turbo perspective, right? Greg and I are both turbo guys, and one of the initial challenges I would say when speaking with prospects or even new customers is getting people to understand, like, what we do, because our approach to things is so novel. There's not really like a direct comparison out there. So, like, as you kind of just mentioned, like, kind of getting your arms around it, is it because, kind of like you said, there really hasn't been a purpose-built platform like this? So, it's kind of a challenge to just kind of even conceptualize and understand first before even kind of, I guess, sharing that message with customers.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's kind of a line that every seller eventually finds, which is, it's not that hard to tell the story and the 30,000 foot value proposition, but I think it starts to get tricky when you're trying to get to that next level of depth and you're really starting to isolate and break out. Okay, well, they like the story, but which part of the stack is really going to solve their problem? What do I need to ask them to even figure out what kind of the universe is that they play in, so that we don't go off kind of talking about the wrong things or things at that next level of depth that don't really pertain. So that's where it starts to get a little tricky, I think. So tell that story, get folks interested, connect with your Apptio colleagues, and we can help work with you there to make sure we're drilling in appropriately.
Makes sense.
I've got sort of an odd question.
I love it already. Odd question. All right.
In my life, my world, and in professional services, we've got what we call the Turbonomic Journey, and basically what that is prescribed use cases by phase: initial, core, foundation, advanced, right? That we drive customers' maturity with the product so they can gain value out of it. Is there something like that for ApptioOne that you have a professional services org or a customer maturity journey that you take them through that has those use cases? And what are some of those typical or core use cases of ApptioOne?
Yeah, we do. We are a big fan of roadmaps.
Mhm.
Trying to think. I have a handful of kind of slides handy here just in case we were going to go there, but I don't know.
That's why Adam is the best. He was
Yeah.
like,
Well, I know. Actually,
case,
if I were the
just in
best, I
case.
wouldn't have brought it up because I don't think I have one of these on hand that I'm thinking of. So I have like 145 slides at my fingertips, but I don't think I have one that addresses this. And now we just spent a minute talking about a thing I don't have. So there's room for improvement.
We'll just put it in
but-
post-processing, right, Joe?
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Here's what I would say. So the complete kind of delivery of an ApptioOne solution, even kind of core ApptioOne solution, it definitely happens in kind of phases. And so let's see. You know what? I can pull something out here.
Yes. He's got something,
right.
Joe.
I got something.
I was going to use it as the cliffhanger for the next episode. And if you want to find out what was on that slide, tune in next time.
Yeah, it's not too late.
Fine.
We could still
It's
do
fine.
that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
All right, let's see. So let me know if you see this automated TBM and ITFM slide.
Yes.
Okay. So this has a slight public sector flavor because that's where I spend most of my time, but it's pretty darn applicable to just about any organization, and I use it with commercial organizations as well. But this gets a little more specific into some of the stuff I was talking about before, right? Lots of stakeholder types, and this is not exhaustive, but it's a good example. It's a good kind of representation of the breadth of the kinds of audiences that we're looking to help with. And the challenge is that everybody asks the questions. Everybody needs to understand answers to the money question in very different ways. And so I'm not going to read through these, but you get a sense of the very different ways that people ask these questions. And just about none of these answers to none of these questions can be found in an organization's financial system or general ledger. So that's where Apptio comes in. And the way that we do that is by overcoming those technical inhibitors that we talked about. And I'm getting to the roadmap question, by the way.
Yeah,
but the
it's a good
first
setup.
Thank you. So the first piece here is around automation of data ingest, transformation, normalization, enrichment, right? And this goes to what I talked about earlier in terms of the fact that these data sources were not built to play together. Our Oracle financial system and our ServiceNow systems, there's not a whole lot of connective tissue there. Asset CMDB systems, invoices from vendors, labor and activity tracking tools, cloud bills, right? All of this stuff was not built to play nicely together, but we automate that ingest. We give you the abilities to automate transformation and cleansing of all that. We then give you the ability to automate rules and allocations against that using the modeling layer. This is where we basically take financials, we set up and establish those rules to align financials and cost burden resources, and then align cost burden resources to things that we deliver, those solutions, those applications, those services like we talked about. And last but not least, we facilitate the automated creating or calculation of metrics in the dashboards that ultimately these folks consume.
How does this data get into ApptioOne? Is like what's the mechanism by which ApptioOne ingests data from all these various sources?
So we make it really easy. We have two fundamental approaches. One approach is the manual approach where you push the button and you simply import in whatever kind of data set you've exported from another place through whatever means. So you can do that for anything you want to bring in kind of on demand, ad hoc, or that where automation doesn't necessarily make sense. And obviously, for many of our data sources and on an ongoing basis, folks like to not have to push the button. So we do provide a comprehensive library of automated automation connectors as well. We do that through a capability set we call Data Link, but it's just part of the platform. So we have a whole bunch of third-party specific connectors that are kind of built against specific third-party vendor APIs. So we have your VMwares and your cloud providers and even some financial systems, labor systems, other IT systems. ServiceNow, of course, is a huge one that we actually just even released some more tight integration with, where we're being featured on the ServiceNow store at this point. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And so we enable automation through that set of connector libraries that are really easy to configure and keep running over time. But I don't want to ditch the earlier question. So just to kind of come back and tie off the knot on the roadmap piece, there's a lot of data sources here, right? So this is a lot of opportunity. It's a powerful platform to bring all this kind of stuff together, but it can be a bit daunting for most organizations to actually identify all this stuff. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of different parts of the organization that are responsible for these different systems. And not everyone's necessarily willing to share their data on day one, certainly without being told to, right? So there's politics and there's change management and there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. And then there's technical complexity. Everybody's concerned about the quality of their data. So, financials have to be generally a certain, level of accurate, but maybe they're not very granular. CMDB systems, asset systems, we hear all the time, are wildly full of gaps or inconsistent and imperfect. Surely we can't use them, right, Apptio? So the answer to that question, by the way, is no. That's not actually true. We do great things for you with great data, and we also do great things for you with less great data by helping you understand where those gaps and inconsistencies are. But that's kind of neither here nor there. My point of all this is we get you started with the things that are most readily available and where we're going to be able to help you realize value in the shortest amount of time. So those kinds of things tend to be, some of the core inputs tend to be things like our financials, our budget, potentially our labor, and even just starting around a few key data sources like financials, budget, and labor, maybe bringing in a simple list of applications or solutions, things of that nature, give us more than enough to really start to build out some very powerful and quick first initial set of use cases around finance, financial breakouts, variance analysis, and even an initial view into your portfolio delivery costs and maintenance. And then the idea from there is that over time, based on what else you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, are trying to do and where you want to go, we can kind of tweak and adjust that forward-looking roadmap to give you more accuracy or more drill down into that portfolio view to help you deliver a show back or a charge back that aligns and relates in a defensible, explainable manner. How does all of that fully burdened cost TCO of your solutions and your services, how does that actually carve out across all of the consumers benefiting from those things? So it's not necessarily a one size fits all, but generally we have a pretty prescriptive approach to where you start, like with some of the data sources that we talked about, the use cases that those support, and then kind of iterating and road mapping and journeying forward based on what those relative priorities are for the customer.
Could you maybe, you said two phrases there that we hear a lot when we talk about Apptio, but I don't want to just assume that everyone maybe has a full understanding of what they are or why they're important. But you said TCO and you said fully burdened cost, and I guess maybe you don't have to go super deep, but maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on, what those two things are and, why those are an important thing to understand and to be able to track and.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. So TCO stands for total cost of ownership. What was the second thing you asked me about?
Fully burdened cost.
Oh, right. And so fully burdened refers to the fact that a total cost of ownership, what's involved in that total cost? Well, it's things like labor, whoops, if I can use my tool here. It's things like labor. It's things like software and hardware. It's things like the space, the value of the space that we're consuming in the data center, or the number of cloud resources. So the notion of fully burdened cost is, does a TCO, does a total cost of ownership actually take into account all of those different drivers of cost or cost drivers? And that's what this picture shows, right? It's this idea that, we have our core financial system, our general ledger, our finance system, whatever we call it, that can be effectively broken out, that very financial category oriented spend can be translated to core, what we call cost pool categories, things like internal, external labor, software, hardware, and more. We then need, and in order to kind of serve our stakeholders that we've talked about, we need a view that's basically going to answer the question, how does all of this cost translate to the different core technology functions I provide? Things like compute, storage, and network, each of which have drivers of cost that come from things like internal and external labor, hardware, software, and so on. So we fully cost burden our technology functions. We then align or allocate or leveraging, asset or CMDB data for more advanced organizations, for example, through any of these different approaches. We take the right slices and make the right definitions, apply the right rules so that the appropriate fully cost burdened set of compute dollars are corresponded to each of those applications or solutions in turn. So this whole idea of TCO is really important when it comes down to managing your organization like a business, in order to be able to articulate what are my cost of goods delivered, what are all of those components, right? And we need that for several reasons. We need that for our own understanding, so that we can identify, is it good or bad? Are we happy or unhappy about where we are? And then we don't just need the top level number. The top level number is key. Understanding if the top level number is going up or down over time, and how that up or down is tracking against what we planned. We need all those things. But we also need to be able to drill inside it and understand, hey, where does this number come from? Do I believe this number? What are the drivers? And, particularly for our more expensive solutions, are our most expensive solutions actually supporting the most strategically relevant priorities of our organization? And if not, what are those actual drivers, and are there opportunities for me to optimize? So, yeah, that's probably a little bit more than you bargained for on
No,
TCO and
that's
cost
no,
drivers.
but
That's a
that
good
I
answer.
think that's a great answer. Because it is all of those things. And I guess I wonder then, how do customers traditionally approach that without something like ApptioOne? I mean, it sounds like maybe there's not really a reliable way to do it, because I would assume, you know, it would just be a very manual effort that would just, the scale
Lots
of
of
it would
Excel.
just be too crazy to actually to have it. So,
Typically, it's a lot of spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It's a lot of spreadsheets, and it's work that can't be done to the level that folks would like it to be done, with the frequency they'd like it to be done, with the accuracy they'd like it to be done, right? So it gets done less good and less often, because it's just not feasible to do all of this manually in spreadsheets quickly, rapidly, or over and over again. So there's a significant lack of visibility that typically exists in organizations without a purpose-built solution like Apptio, and it's because they're stuck doing it through, Excel spreadsheets largely.
Then I
Um,
had just one very small slice of that in a previous role where I had to have input on projections for software and hardware refreshes, whether it was a timeline for a software purchase or a timeline for a software renewal or hardware technology refresh. And every time the finance guy pulled up that spreadsheet, I just groaned like, here I got to mess with this spreadsheet again. I'm out.
yeah, that's cool. So we didn't plan this, but give me a second here.
Mhm.
Let's see if I do that and I do this. So folks like to hear real world stories. So let me give you a real world story. So we're talking about the challenge of figuring out technology refresh. And I'm gonna give you a quick show over here. If I can find my WebEx window again and share this. Oh, yeah, here we come. All right, do you see my screen client profile?
Yep.
Yes.
So this is a really neat example. This is actually, there's all kinds of out-of-box demo stuff, out-of-box capability reports, dashboards. What I'm about to show you is actually a little bit of a one-off that we constructed for a unique set of requirements at one of our customers. But a lot of text here. The idea is it's a large organization with a lot of resources, decentralized purchasing, so pretty hard to manage. Refreshes were typically, I'm kind of giving it away. You see things like end of year money. So this is actually a federal organization, but you have the situation where you overbuy, things sit. By the time you're ready to use them, they're outdated, right? So lots of end of life challenges, and then implementing Apptio. What we did is we automated through all of that data challenge, helped folks understand exactly what their landscape was, significantly helped them reduce their IT asset costs. You can see by a full third, a substantial amount of money based on this data from a number of years back when we were getting started with them. And they've updated their ability to forecast looking forward. So they can actually, they're, instead of being kind of constantly catching up and surprised, they actually have a 5-year forward-looking refresh plan that they don't have to manually maintain because Apptio is doing that work for them. And so the way that they do this, I talked about how Apptio's it's grown into an application company. And what we mean by an application company is we provide a whole bunch of reports, visuals, analytics that start to light up as you go through that core configuration. So it's not just a platform where you have to build the stuff yourself. You have to figure out what are the reports I want, what are the metrics I want. We do all that. But we still have, it's still it's still supported by that underlying platform set of capabilities. And that means we can build those reports, define those KPIs ourselves and do our own thing to meet a particular use case. And that's what we did here. So the idea is we wanted to understand from a core technology refresh dashboard perspective, what do we need to know? And so we're bringing in we're sourcing data from our spend plan, from our financial actual system, as well as our asset management systems. And we're doing things like understanding, hey, what's our current budget? What is actually the cost to replace all of my current or near-term end-of-life assets? And by the way, this cost to do this is way higher than my current budget. Without Apptio, you don't see these things until much later. And then
Until
you realize,
the bill comes.
right. Well, right. Or it's even worse in, better or worse, depending on how you look at it in the federal government though, right? Because if you run out of money, you can't spend the money. It's illegal to spend more money. You can't do that.
You got to wait till next year when you get a new budget approved, and it's a whole thing. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. So getting this kind of visibility without having to know to look for it and figure out how to do it is huge.
Yeah.
So these folks are able to see these big discrepancies months and months ahead of when the execution year actually starts. So they can figure this out, right? They can figure out, let's have the conversation about whether we can bring this budget number up, or let's be realistic about what we're actually going to be able to get done in this year, instead of disappointing a whole lot of people and constantly fighting fires. So these are the kinds of things that we can do. Lots of visibility on a forward-looking time frame around understanding exactly what that asset age distribution looks like. How much of our stuff is really old? Almost half. So kind of serious. How much still has some life left? How much is not so much, which is I'm sorry, actually I drew these all wrong, right? 4 to 5, here's our old stuff. A quarter of it's really old. A bulk of it is pretty new, so we're good there. and then we have some in between. The other thing I wanted to call out is this little slice of blue, which just builds on that idea that I was talking about. Even where our data is imperfect, even where your data as a customer is imperfect, Apptio helps surface that. So instead of just not trusting the data and not being able to do anything with it, you're able to take advantage of the data that's good, and Apptio is able to help you quantify how much of your data actually is a problem. And is it a lot or a little? And by drilling into that, we can even figure out what are the specific items where we lack that visibility. So it really kind of takes, what is very scary and daunting to a lot of people around an imperfect data landscape, and it just kind of shines a light on it and says, oh, okay, this is, we actually have a lot of this that's usable and great today. And for the rest of it, now I know what it is, and I can even quantify which parts of it are worth the most so that I can take the limited amount of extra time that I have and focus it on a useful, productive exercise to incrementally improve that data quality over time.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, it can't be an all or nothing proposition where like if it's not perfect, we're not using it, right? So that's what you're saying, we're just not going to do anything. Okay, great.
Right.
You get that sort of paralysis by analysis where you're just kind of stuck, like, oh, what do I do?
That's right.
For a question here about that ring chart that you had there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
is that data around like the age of these assets, is that getting automatically pulled from like the contracts with those vendors, or like is that like give me an example of how something like that kind of data would get into Apptio in terms of the age of something?
So it could be something along those lines. Typically, this is going to be more like a service management system or an asset system or a
Got it.
CMDB, right? So that's typically it's one of those kinds of systems where you're actually tracking all of your inventory and things like purchase dates, in-service dates, end-of-life dates. And so Apptio is constantly tracking that against where we actually are in time at a given point that we're looking at the dashboard here, and helping you understand, hey, as of this period of time that we're focused on, how does that universe of assets actually stack up in terms of age and when we're going to need to look to refresh them. Now, we do a lot as well from a contract procurement system set of input types as well. One of the really powerful things about Apptio that I haven't explicitly called out yet, but that's worth mentioning, is the fact that if you think about any one use case in Apptio, there are a lot of singular uses in Apptio that there's probably already a tool to do somewhere else. So finance folks can already do their reporting in their financial system. Labor folks can already manage their labor in an HR system, for example. And contracts folks and procurement folks and acquisition folks can manage their own worlds through contract management or procurement systems. But one of the challenges is that, or one of the big opportunities that Apptio provides is to provide a common environment for
Totally
folks
agree.
across all of these organizations to see all of these different views. Most of the time, we don't have a whole lot of people who are able to access those contract systems or who even know how to navigate them that aren't in the contract world. You have lots of IT people who are going to benefit from understanding, hey, when do I have contracts expiring? How's that going to impact my service? What decisions do I need to make? How's that going to update my forecast moving forward? So Apptio brings these things together and really democratizes that information in powerful ways that actually make it all of the things that these different people need to understand available in a single and easy to use place. So contract data is definitely one of those pieces, and monitoring kind of where we are from a contract perspective. Where do we have contracts coming up for expiration in the next 30, 60, 90, 180 days, for example? What are those things I should be aware of? And we even enable things like scenario modeling on top of that. What's it going to do to my budget if I do cut this contract off, and if I do expand investment in that other contract to kind of take over some of those capabilities? What does that do to my forecast? So a lot of powerful capabilities on that front.
I think that's a really interesting statement, and not one that I think I've like heard sort of presented as like a real value here, because clearly it is, and I'm sure I just haven't heard it. Doesn't mean it's never been said, but like you said, like HR can handle labor, like they understand that, and the contract folks, they have their thing, and they have a handle on that, and this isn't there to replace those individual elements of it. To me, it sounds like it's really more of something that, kind of like you just described, fills the gaps, provides a common language, obviously the tooling around it all, but it's a sort of holistic tool as opposed to like a sort of specific, one section. It's kind of like at the United Nations when you were saying, I just thought of like the headphones that everyone wears, so that like no matter who's speaking, everyone understands what's being said, and that's
Right.
happening in real time. And I think that's the kind of the value that sounds like that Apptio is able to deliver. And again, not to drink our own Kool-Aid here, but maybe that no one else can really do. I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'll give you one more visual over here as long as we're on it.
don't spoil us with all the slides. Now people are going to expect it from you, Adam. Every
I
time you
know,
slides
no
today.
promises. This might be it. This might be a one-time thing.
It.
But this is this is a really powerful kind of visual representation of that high level of exactly what we've just talked through, right? The whole idea with this dashboard is what does this dashboard do? It helps us understand, and it tells us what our IT spend actually is, our technology spend. Why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because there really isn't any other place that you can go without a purpose-built solution like Apptio that has all of this in a single place in a way that's actually maintainable and isn't an absolute beast to build, let alone maintain over time. So
Yeah.
understanding all
How
those
many
finance
platforms or
levers is so
spreadsheets do you think this represents in like a traditional model? Like,
well, that's an interesting question.
like because I'm
Yeah.
looking at it and I'm saying like, yeah, like you said, all of these things represent sort of specific areas that traditionally are siloed, and correlating that data and understanding the bigger picture is impossible when you're taking that approach. So I'm just curious if
Yeah.
you've ever thought about that. Like, is
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah. So these bottom four quadrants, right? I guess they're not technically quadrants because there's six of them, but I'm going to call them quadrants anyway. So we're working with six quadrants. Um, these are core financials, labor, vendors, contracts. These are effectively all cost drivers of things like our solutions, things that we deliver. And then we have our consumers and the way that all of our solution consumption or benefiting breaks out across our consumers. But so if you think about these cost driver categories, what are we seeing reflected in our financials? Typically things like our GL, our financial system, things like our budgets or our spend plans. When we move into the labor side, we're looking at feeds from maybe an HR system, other labor roster type data. Potentially also doing some alignment there back to our GL and financial system. And then if we move up the stack, our contract and vendor landscape, this is typically going to be more from those procurement, contract management systems. If we want to track things like burn down against contracts, we can bring in things like our AP, accounts payable systems, POs, purchase orders, so that we can actually track what's being spent and how do each of those things impact the amount of money that we've committed to spend across each of these contracts, for example. Vendors is similar. And then the idea when we get to the solutions layer is we don't necessarily need, especially in earliest days, to get folks started. We can present really powerful views into what that portfolio level, those solution TCOs look like, just from this same data that we've already started to bring in to support these other use cases below. So we can use Apptio's rules engine to basically take the components of cost, burden, labor, resources, contracts, and vendors to align to each of those solutions. Now, for those customers who are more mature or who have gotten started and are looking for the next step, there's the opportunity to bring in some of those other data sources we saw on the slide earlier, things like that CMDB or asset data, things like software license management data, even other forms and flavors of utilization data or network monitoring. So these things can start to get a little more advanced. And what we like to do is not try to boil the ocean with folks. There's a lot of value that you can get just by starting with sources that tend to be relatively obtainable, things like financials, labor, and vendor data. but then the opportunity again is there to kind of expand and provide additional drill-in capability and things like that by adding even more fancy sources like I just started to describe.
What is the time to value here generally? I know that's going to be different for every customer depending on the scenario, the size of the organization, the complexity, and so on. But like just generally speaking, right? You've engaged with the customer. They're like, yes, this is great. What from start to maybe not something as fleshed out as this, but something close to this. What's like a general timeline? I guess an ROI, if you will.
Yeah, great question, critical question, and the answer is even just what we're seeing here with drill downs that are fully supported into each of these areas can be delivered in as little as 8 weeks. So this is actually using a new and kind of revamped, simplified methodology that we've been developing over the last 6 to 12 months based on years of working with customers, obviously, and kind of identifying, everybody wants to kind of get to a similar place over a very long period of time, but based on where most people are and what we can kind of do in a short period of time and balancing all of that out, we've identified a process that gets them really far and really powerful visibility within about 8 weeks time. And that's even for everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Well, listen, it's late on a Friday afternoon, and so I want to be mindful of that. So, I know we're going to have you on again. Like I said, we're going to try to go through each of the sort of the major platforms, right? I think maybe next time we'll do Cloudability, so that's great. But before I let you go, maybe we'll end the next few episodes with this question because I think this is good, because for a lot of the IBM folks who are watching aren't as familiar with the sales message, if you will, of these platforms. So if you had to give like an elevator pitch, high level elevator pitch for ApptioOne, what would that sound like? Something quick and easy that people can kind of internalize.
Yeah, I'll do better rather than just.
I should have warned you before I asked this question. I know I'm just springing this on you now, so apologies.
It's better this way.
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. But people are visual sometimes, so I will support my own answer to your question with a visual.
I like it.
For people who are visual. But I just lost it. Where'd it go? There we go.
It is crazy. I feel like we could talk about this all day though, because I still have a whole bunch more questions, but it's fine. We'll pick them up next time.
It's a deep rabbit hole. It is. This is it, right? So Apptio's the leading technology spend and value management company. What does that mean? It means that we help organizations, everyone from top level leadership to the folks who are actually running the operation, to better understand where the money's going. Why do we care about understanding? It helps us more effectively communicate between our finance, our business, our technical folks. It helps us better collaborate and partner. And it puts us in a position to actually optimize what we're spending for what value delivered. Whoops. And, we do that across a variety of areas. The cloud FinOps space, which we'll talk about next time, technology, business management, and ITFM, which we talked about today, and agile and portfolio resource management. And we do it with our unique platform that I've talked about today. So, if you want to manage the technology, the massive technology operation as a business, you want to bridge those gaps, that's what Apptio's here to help you do.
Unless you love Excel and you're just really into that, you keep doing that too, I guess. Whatever you're into.
You love Excel. As long as you said that, though, I will highlight that Excel users love Apptio. So we built the solution to be usable and run and owned and operated by Excel users. So it's that power user set of capability in the back end is very Excel-like because we know that the entire universe of people who's struggling to do this today are doing it in Excel. So let's not make them learn something wildly different. Let's give them something similar, but that does it a lot more effectively.
So if
Good
you
to-
love VLOOKUPs and pivot tables.
You love VLOOKUPs, you're going to love Apptio lookups.
Does anyone really love VLOOKUPs now?
Yeah,
I think there are people. I do.
My wife works in finance. I don't even know what it is. I just heard her say she does that. I have no
It's
idea.
very powerful. I
It's
use
a
it all
real
the time
thing.
for Turbo to join data sets. It's great.
Yep, it's a thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Kind of a big deal.
Anyways, guys, like I said, it's Friday.
Yeah,
So, and this was a fantastic conversation. I mean, this time flew by.
absolutely.
Thank you, Adam, as always, for being so gracious with your time and chatting with us.
Very informative. Appreciate you.
Yeah,
totally.
no, you're very welcome. And my pleasure, and happy to keep doing it. So
Sweet.
good to be with you guys.
We'll see. He says that now, but we'll see if he shows up at the next one. I don't know.
Right, yeah.
It's shown up so far.
Hey,
Yeah.
have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks again for watching. As always, for more information on anything we've talked about, check out our community pages. And in the meantime, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Greg on Slack.
That's right. Hit me up. I'm here. I'm here for everyone.
Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.
Thanks,
Stay
guys.
easy.
Bye, guys.